2023. Our next session is all about human and machine intelligence for planetary climate action. And up next, we've got Ramit Debnath and Seán Boyle, bonus points for the good Irish name there, who bring a wealth of experience to the intersection of computational social science, climate action, and artificial intelligence. So Dr. Ramit Debnath is an assistant professor of computational social science and design at Cambridge University. Dr. Debnath is not only the director for the Collective Intelligence and Design Group, but also hosts the prestigious title of the first Cambridge Zero Fellow. His remarkable work extends globally, collaborating with leading academic institutions and influential organizations like Caltech, Harvard University, and the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP. Dr. Debnath's dedication to improving public understanding of climate change is truly commendable. Seán Boyle is a trailblazer in the sustainability space. As Twitter's first head of sustainability, Seán played a pivotal role in launching the company's inaugural climate action strategy. With a career spanning over 8 years at Twitter and previous roles at Meta and KPMG, Seán brings invaluable experience to the table. His partnerships with organizations like the United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and We Don't Have Time, has significantly contributed to climate action efforts. Today, our two speakers, our dynamic duo, are going to address the far-reaching societal and environmental implications of advancing AI. They're going to tackle the pressing need for designing less biased AI systems that actually consider the direct and indirect effects on societies and global climate challenges. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to these two climate AI rock stars. Please welcome Dr. Ramit Debnath and Seán Boyle. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up.
Christine.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you, Oisin, and greetings from Dublin. So it's great to hear from a familiar Irish voice. And thank you, Ultralytics. I think the sessions have been fantastic. Glenn, Tally, and the team, you've done a fantastic job. And you know that we're very big fans of your work. We know that Ultralytics has the potential to offer some of the most significant advancements in computer vision for climate change solutions. And we hope that unit mode will be an example of that. So yes, as I was going to introduce myself, but I guess that Oisin has done an amazing job of that, probably a lot better than I would have. But my name is Seán Boyle, very proud to be here with my, and I will be correcting often, but I used to call him Doctor. He's now Professor Ramit Debnath. And we'll be talking about unit modes and harnessing human and machine intelligence for planetary climate action. So I think I'll just skip to the next slide. So this is just us. We are 99% co-founders, which is a mathematical impossibility. But anyways, we'll move on from that. But we basically have joined forces to start unit mode. We both came from very different backgrounds. We felt incredibly compelled to work on this space because we felt that we could actually make incredibly meaningful advancements in this space, in particular around how we're utilizing computer vision for that. We're at the very, very early stages. So our mission is to accelerate systems level behavior change for climate action. And our hypothesis is that computer vision is going to play one of the most important roles in advancing that mission, particularly in the detection and the design of cognitive efficient vision aids. So to give you a glimpse at unit mode, we're building tools to empower brands to advertise climate efforts responsibly, but we're also building climate-focused consumer tools to inform purchasing choices. So we're making it a very people-centric approach. So let me go to the next. Okay, so look, we know that to urgently bend the curve, we need to bend the curve to minimize the worst impacts of climate change. We know that we need to act now, and we have a deep understanding of how behavior change is needed to help us transition to a net zero future. As an example, the UK House of Lords launched a report that confirmed that, and I quote, 32% of emission reductions up to 2035 require decisions by individuals and households to adopt low carbon technologies and choose low carbon products and services, as well as reduce carbon intensive consumptions. I think we should caveat that governments have a primary role in allowing us to advance our sort of like climate targets, but definitely behavior change is going to play an absolutely fundamental role, and doing so in a way that it's people-centric is going to be absolutely critical. So Professor Debnath and we have a unique perspective on how marketing can influence, can turn from being a host of greenwashing to a catalyst for climate action. So the problem that we're facing is that most consumers just don't trust brands. And according to PwC, 78% of consumers are willing to pay higher for a sustainable product and 75% for goods produced by a company with a reputation for ethical practices. But unfortunately, and based on this study from the European Commission launched earlier this year, about 53% of environmental claims made by companies contain vague, misleading, or unfounded information, and 40% of those are completely unsubstantiated. This year alone, we saw many companies have their ads banned, and enforcement of regulations occur across many countries, including the UK. We saw that in France, in Germany, and so on. We see computer vision and machine learning, probably more broadly, as the meaningful tools that can help brands, regulators, and consumers alike to identify problematic and also recognize and celebrate great content. So even some of the world's largest brands, they may not have the in-house expertise. Many of you may have seen this video, but there are like emerging regulations that are very difficult to track, and the risk of consumer backlash is a very high price to pay for a lot of brands. But this video in particular that some of you may have seen, which was launched last week, it was one shared by Apple, which the intent was to promote the environmental efforts of the company. And we admire, and I admire a lot of the things that Apple has done and is currently doing, and certainly they have done more than most. But even they admit that they have a long way to go. What is significant about this is that the EU Green Claims Directive regulation, which is likely to pass in November, may make this video in its current format deemed potentially vague, misleading, or unfounded based on the reports from the European Commission. So the issue is that regulators only respond to consumer complaints. Computer vision and AI will change that and will help rebalance that asymmetric influence that brands hold over consumers. We need to start designing systems that place people at the center of climate action. And this is where the research from Professor Debnath is so relevant and important. So over to you, Ramit.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Just give a thumb. Yeah, okay. So as Seán mentioned, like a very core part of this gap, more from like product development and marketing side, is also at understanding what we mean by people-centric in this context. So is just getting some data out of like people is equal to people-centric, or enabling people to annotate those data, is that people-centric? So that's where a lot of emphasis that we also focus on unit mode is at the systems level, like understanding the entire value chain of both model building as well as from where we are getting the data, as well as the reward models that we might create in the end. So that's why the whole emphasis on these human in the loop systems, as well as going forward these human machine ensemble models that we are constantly testing. I mean, both at from a university research level, which is very theoretical at this moment, but also we are trying to, for example, this is one of the research like from my group that shows the impact of heat waves is more than it is expected. I mean, that is estimated at this moment. But what it also tells us going forward is how these tools, especially the AI tools, and how we can empower consumers to act on climate in very specific ways. So for example, in the heat wave context, one way of dealing with AI tools is actually, I mean, for example, very specifically, computer vision is actually using your phone's camera as a thermal detector to basically understand where are the heat spots. And more if you go slightly higher above the level at a land surface temperature scale. So that's where it gets even more interesting, where you can actually help policymakers and decision makers look at specific spots of very high reflectance and zones. And that's more of a policy level stuff. So that's something that we also intend to do with unit mode, is not just look at a very consumer centric level, but also go high above at a macro scale to help even a lot more people. And that's where, for example, if you can go to the next slide, Sean. Like, this is one of the again very theoretical study and an attempt to basically understand the source of bias and risks in data sets that we currently have to train large language models, and especially I mean most of the foundation models that has been discussed. And there are 5 basic key risks that arise, right from the actors who use it, who develop it, to the consequences, and those are still not yet clearly understood. And one ways that we are aiming also to study is to also enable and empower users who use our product to have an understanding of these biases. And so that's one way of reducing confirmation bias that's been seen and discussed quite often in many behavioral science work, but also from a user centric point of view. So that's where new things like prompt engineering are going to be more important. So is it zero shot, is it one shot, or I mean multi shot? So that's where it's still an open question. And I mean I don't have the right answer at this moment, but with our tools that we are developing, we are actually very keen on testing some of these, and how do we calibrate the existing foundation models and large language models even with the vision systems, so that we could have a baseline and an estimate of how much bias can be reduced by enabling more human feedback in those elements. So again, at a very broad scale, so this is what we have been thinking for climate action, because climate action at individual level, and it's still contested a lot, that uh, many people believe that our individual action is not enough to act on climate change. It's too big a problem and at a very planetary scale. But sometimes we need to bring down or distill this understanding that every one individual counts, because this is how all of these our actions, right from our customs, norms, and how we interact with various elements of our socio-political systems, actually contribute to something known as social tipping points. So these social tipping points are very critical, and they are less understood in the form of large language models or foundational models. But right now, I mean, even new research is slowly coming up, and it's showing that we do have the capability right now to understand the dimensions of these social tipping points, even with like GPT-3 and GPT 4.5, and some of these even bigger like large language and foundational models. So we, since these models are trained on everything that's on the internet, yes, I mean that's again one of the biases, that it's not representative enough. But even there are many information on different elements of technology and governance, policies and regulations, resource allocations that we find in many contexts. And especially, like, I have seen my colleagues work with pre-training some of the BERT models with these specific regulations and resource allocation questions, which make it very contextualized and useful to use in more decision making questions. So how this human in the loop design, that's our at the very core of the design of unit mode is, and it corrects. So we intend to correct these 3 sources of biases across these streams. One is biased algorithm, biased programming, and biased database. So algorithm and programming is easier to uh, correct, I mean slightly more easier, because they are based on logic and mathematical programming. But the challenge is actually at the bias database scale, because it's the lack of inclusivity and diversity in the space. So that's where is our main aim, that by doing this or building these tools, especially across, so we are not only focusing on vision, but we also focus on natural language as well. So using these tools as a feedback to get some data with all the checks and balances that's being developed across the FACT community, which is fairness, accountability, transparency, and now E is also added, so it's called faith, ethics. So all these checks and balances and the risk maps that's there. So we are actually trying to integrate them in our system and the pipelines that's we are building. So I mean, we would need more time to speak about it, but since keeping it very contextualized and very focused, so that's the whole vision that we have with unit mode and the tools that we are developing, and provide a more safer space for responsible AI in the consumer hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for anybody that is interested and wants to reach out, please feel free to do so. We're very excited to partner with anybody, and we're big fans of the work that you're all doing. So thank you very much.
Debnath, that was wonderful. Such an inspiring presentation. So great to see you doing this good work, and with not a second to lose. So I'm sure many people have questions. Reach out on LinkedIn and we'll be in touch with you.